Can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Leanne Tippett-Mosby.
Okay. And what is your connection to the case?
So I was one of three plaintiffs, along with Cathy Kuhlmeier and Leslie Smart.
Okay. And what was your role in the newspaper specifically?
I was a bit of a jack of all trades for the Spectrum. I did a little bit of writing, a little bit of editing, some graphic work. I was officially the cartoonist, and so we actually had a cartoon strip called East Side Story.
What was your life like during that time period?
I had a great high school experience overall, notwithstanding this censorship issue. Had a lot of friends across the entire spectrum. I was the kind of person that had friends in all different walks of life. The jocks and the brains, and of course the journalism students. That was probably one of the most fun classes that I had.
And did you take journalism all 4 years of high school?
No, journalism was only a one-year program. So the first semester you learn the nuts and bolts of how to write a story, good journalism, who, what, when, where, journalism ethics, things like that. And then after you finished that semester, then you actually did the newspaper. So you had the hands-on experience of actually producing the newspaper in the second semester. So that was just 1 year. Now, some students also did yearbook, so that was another class.
Okay, just jumping into the case, what was your initial reaction with your peers after being censored by Mr. Reynolds?
My initial reaction was I didn't really understand what was going on. So we our paper was normally a 4-page paper, and this one, this issue, we had been working on for quite some time, probably the better part of the year. We started really working on it before we even got into the second semester, where we actually produced the paper, because we had gone to a conference, a scholastic journalism conference, and our paper was critiqued. And the critique that they had about it was, we were just writing stories that weren't very substantive, about prom and sports and things like that, or so they suggested we write something of more substance. So we came up with this idea during the first semester and then started working on it. So when we initially got the paper back and it was just 4 pages, I thought the printer had made a mistake. And then somewhere in the not too distant future from that, we realized what had happened was it had been censored. And then the principal, one of the assistant principals, came up to the class to talk with us. So, as you might imagine, we were very frustrated. Another group of students, I wasn't involved in this group, but another group of students went down to have a little bit more conversation with the principal. And ultimately, we contacted our advisor, that Mr. Sturgis, who had left in the middle of the semester. I think Cathy probably contacted him. And someone suggested that we contact the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, because it's just, defending First Amendment rights is their entire wheelhouse. So we did do that.
And what was the goal of bringing the lawsuit to trial?
Well, first and foremost, we felt that our rights had been violated, and if we were going to be the only ones who were going to be able to stand up for ourselves. We had, when we first went to the ACLU, we actually had 5 students. There were 2 additional students who were actually writers of the story that went with us to have that initial conversation. And then, but their parents, they were also juniors. I was the only senior of the 5, and the other 4 were juniors. And those 2 students who ended up dropping out, their parents were not supportive of them. I think they were maybe afraid of repercussions that might happen, since they had 1 additional year left. I didn't have that issue because I was graduating. My parents and Cathy's parents and Leslie's parents, they were all very much behind us, and they too felt like we had to stand up for our rights. So that was our purpose. And I think we did, at least it's my recollection is that there was some back and forth. They didn't jump immediately to a lawsuit, but there was some, attempt at negotiations with the school district, but they didn't produce fruit. So the ACLU did end up filing suit.
And after the trial loss, how much involvement did you have in the case at an appellate level?
So not as much certainly as the district court, because of course when you're going to the district court, it involves testimony, and we actually we all testified. I think poor Cathy probably bore the brunt of it because I think she had to testify the longest because she had to kind of go through all the facts. So when they got to me, they had already covered quite a bit of that, and so it was more, what was the impact on you? Because one of the things the ACLU did was they put damages in the case. They requested damages. And so a lot of the testimony that I did revolved around, how are you affected, and trying to kind of get at that damages piece. So, of course, as you're aware, we lost in that round. And then when it went to the appeals, we were, when I say involved, we were involved. The attorneys were really good about keeping us informed about what was going on. So the way it works is they assign a pro bono attorney, so attorney that works for free, basically volunteers, and then a staff attorney as well. And they were really great about explaining things to us. And of course, we were kids and we were attorneys, so explaining it to us and how things would work was we weren't involved in the strategy of the case or anything. And of course, when you go to the appeals court, you're not taking the testimony. The appeals court is just reviewing the record. So that's why it's really important to make sure that you get a good record at the first level. And then the attorneys get up and they have their opportunity to address the court. And we did get the opportunity to actually watch that. They happened to have it at. They held the hearing at Washington University because at this point, when it got to the appeals court, the case had gained nationwide notoriety at that point. So I thought it would be a good learning experience for the Washington U students.
How did the district court trial differ from the Eighth Circuit Court appellate argument?
I can't. I don't think it really. I don't recall that there was much difference. I mean, the crux of the issue was that from our side was that the paper had been established as a forum for student expression, and that the standard for review should be the Tinker versus Des Moines, meaning there has to be a substantial and material disruption of the school day in order for some sort of censorship to occur. The school, of course, took the view that the newspaper was part of the curriculum and therefore they should have control over it. And those really didn't change. Those arguments didn't change throughout the course of the case that I recall. So ultimately when it got to the Supreme Court, it's the school district side, obviously weighed out, it got the majority of the court in a 5-3 decision.
So what was your initial reaction to the district court decision being reversed?
I was pleasantly surprised, although maybe not all that surprised. The different courts kind of have different reputations for being maybe more conservative or more liberal. And my recollection is, that maybe we weren't terribly surprised that the Eighth Circuit sided with us. We were afraid that the school would appeal the case, and of course they did. And we were hoping that the Supreme Court wouldn't grant cert. And so we were not surprised, but we were disappointed when we found out that they did. At that point in time, the Supreme Court was hearing about they were taking about 1 in 400 cases. Now it's much fewer. They get more cases brought to them than they did back in those days. But the fact that they decided to hear this case, means that it had some level of importance, national importance, and importance in the law.
Do you think the judges would have made the same decision if it was heard today?
I do. In fact, I think it's pretty clear to me that it would be a 6-3 decision. And, I do believe at the time, I didn't sense that the court was political. They had obviously their political leanings. We talk about more conservative justices and more liberal justices. And so we knew who those were. But Sandra Day O'Connor was often viewed as the swing vote, and we were hopeful that she might be able to, or that she might side with us, and then we would have a 4-4 decision, which would then revert to the Court of Appeals decision. So we were hopeful. Obviously, that didn't happen.
How were you personally impacted by the decision at the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals?
I was, of course, elated that happened. I liked the fact that they recognized that students, and that, like the Tinker decision says, students don't shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate. So I was very happy about that. And I have children, and I would fight for them the same way I fought for myself if something similar happened to them.
How has your views on newspapers changed?
Well, I think I realized the importance of newspapers and the fact that they're enshrined in the First Amendment. It's incredibly important to have a press that's unencumbered by political leanings to be able to shed light on what is happening in government. Obviously, we have issues today with misinformation and, through social media. It's maybe harder for people to separate the wheat from the chaff and find the good information in a sea of we're inundated 24/7 with information. So to find a reputable journalistic outlet that follows journalistic standards is really incumbent upon all of us to do that and to make sure that we're getting accurate information so that we can, hold our government accountable and make decisions when we go into the voting booth about what we want in terms of policy. So journalism plays an incredibly important role in our government and our system of government. So much so, I actually went back. I just went back a couple years ago, and I obtained my master's in journalism at the University of Missouri. One of the best journalism schools in the world. And so I did that because I do believe that good information, accurate information that gets disseminated to the public is absolutely critical to democracy.
I think you already kind of touched base on this before, but what was your reaction when you learned that the school district had appealed the case to the Supreme Court of the United States?
Well, I wasn't surprised. The school district, I think, was pretty adamant, and I feel like they really felt like they should be able to control the newspaper. And so again, I was concerned that the Supreme Court would not decide in our favor. I maintained hope all along that I said it was that there were only 8 justices on the court at the time because they were in the process of filling a vacancy. And so we were hopeful that even after they decided to take the case, we were hopeful that we might get a 4-4 decision because Sandra Day O'Connor was known as a swing vote, and we were hopeful that she would vote with us and vote with the liberals on the court, but that, of course, didn't happen. We were disappointed, but that's the process, so we have to respect the process.
Did you ever think that this case would be as impactful as it is today? Like, people are still talking about this.
I didn't. I didn't. When we first started, I really didn't. It was more about, hey, I felt like my rights were violated, and, we went to try to get that remedied. It happened pretty quickly, though, that it became a pretty nationally known case very quickly after, the ACLU filed and to the first court case or through the district court. But to know that it's considered a landmark Supreme Court case today, and students are still interested in it, that makes me very happy. The other thing that makes me happy is that there are states that are actually passing laws to protect student journalists. So, there's the system of, our system of government has checks and balances. So when you have an unfavorable court decision, then there's an opportunity for the legislative branch to do something to, address a situation. And that's what's happening. And there's several states now that have passed laws, or even just individual school districts within a state have passed policies to protect student journalists. So that's maybe a silver lining. Of course, I'm obviously disappointed that we lost at the Supreme Court level, but there have been some good things that have come of it.
What advice would you give to students today who feel that their voices are suspended by their school?
Well, I think, you should stand up and use the system. Fight for yourselves, talk to each other. That's what we did. We kind of put our heads together. We talked to each other. We talked to people that we trusted. Of course, as high school students, we were not really familiar with the American Civil Liberties Union, so we talked to some adults that we trusted, and they made some suggestions to us. But we did these things ourselves. I mean, we drove to the ACLU ourselves. Our parents didn't do that for us, Like I said, they were very much behind us. But, you have to, if you don't fight for your rights, no one else is going to do it. So if you feel like you have been harmed or that your rights have been violated, then my advice would be to try to get that addressed.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to address here, like just to anyone who's listening right now?
Well, I would just like to say, I think one of the things that's really important, and this is something in the journalism program at Mizzou, they call it the Missouri method. And what that means is it's a hands-on program. So at Mizzou, there is a radio outlet, there are 2 advertising outlets, there's a newspaper, there's a broadcast television station, news station, and students run all of those. And faculty serve as kind of like the editors. Obviously, the faculty are the teachers, but the students do all the content. They do all the writing for the newspaper. They do all the reporting for the radio station. And it's such an incredible way to learn. And I believe that in order to learn responsibility and really learn how those journalistic ethics that we put into play, you really have to do it. You have to practice it. It's not something that you can just, write papers or take tests until you actually get your hands on it and really do the process. So that's why I think, that was one of the things that was most disappointing to me about the way the case went is if you can't teach responsibility. You have to give responsibility. Obviously under guidance by an advisor, a faculty advisor, or what you always have editors, you always have somebody above you, even when you're a professional journalist. But to really be able to learn that responsibility and those ethics, you have to be able to practice it.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here and answering all these questions that people have that they don't get to ask you right now, but we do. And it's a great opportunity for us and for other people. So we really thank you.
Well, I thank you for this opportunity, and it was a joy to be here.